Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us when it's near the end of COP, because everyone's very tired and burnt out. And actually, we were supposed to have Danny and Maria joining us today, but they have had a very full-on week, so day 10 is now taking its toll. But thank you anyway for all coming. I'm Emma. I'm the founder of Earth Minutes, which is a organization that specializes in environmental communications, and we're a young collective of environmental researchers and creatives. We're having this conversation today to decolonize futures with rights for nature. So thank you all, and Kalpana, I'd love to introduce you.
Hi everyone, it's really nice to see everyone on a very hot day, so I hope you've been hydrating yourself. I'm Kalpana, I'm the founder of Nowadays on Earth, which is a social enterprise advocating for contact with nature. I'm also a technologist, an urban greening activist, and a gardener, and super excited to be here today.
And Leonard.
Thank you so much. Hey everyone, my name is Leonard, I'm from Rwanda, and I'm CEO of We for Climate, which is the local organization which try to educate and empower local communities about climate change, but also mid this year I fall in love with filmmaking, so I try to do water filmmaking, environmental filmmaking, so that I can help those local community, international community to spread the message, the voice, to raise their voice about nature and environment. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, thanks, guys. And we're all from a production and technology background. So what we really want to address today is how we can make nature more accessible and inclusive to all. And our first question, which I'm just going to open to all of us, we can have a discussion, is what role can grassroots action play in cultivating the rights for nature to build a just future? So, Kalpana, do you want to have a start?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like cultivating the rights for nature means that we really need to connect with nature. First of all, I work within an urban greening background, and obviously there's a little more of a disparity between how we relate to nature within a city space. And for me, what I've seen is different communities, like community gardens or guerrilla gardens, really lean into people power and leaning into human connections in order to amplify our nature connections. I think in order to protect something, you have to love it and care for it first. So having those relationships that are immediate and on the ground are vital to even getting into the place where we can have a conversation about how we protect nature, both through legal structures, but then also as active agents and citizens of a space. We have the right to protect our local woodlands, our local trees, or the local green spaces that are around us. But oftentimes, that ownership is taken away from us, and this movement that is about giving nature their rights, it's also about recommoning lands and giving ourselves the ownership to take care of the land around us. So I think putting structures in place where we can get people to feel they have an sense of agency of interacting with their natural spaces is vital. So community gardens are a radical point where that interaction can take place. And we have like a mini farm place here, and I wonder how many have been interacting within that space, or the nature that we have around us, as we're walking around, what has been that interaction between, what is nature and what is artificial, and also seeing ourselves as a part of nature is part of that conversation.
Absolutely. And Leonard, from Grassroots Action, you are a filmmaker, and you've been documenting these messages and these people that are driving change. So where do you feel that really kind of the importance of grassroots action fits in with your work?
Well, thank you so much. I think, even if she said a lot, but I think that what we have to know, first of all, is that we are part of nature. Everyone is a part of nature, but what we need is to care about that. And I've been leading an interesting writing from CBD that human food, 60% is from plants of our food we consume. So only that mention how we are connected to nature, and I can say we are nature by ourselves. So we need to know that we are part of nature and we are just composed by nature. And again, giving nature conservation a walk is for everyone, but also remember that we need to consider grassroots communities that mainly for us we call them maybe indigenous people, people who are living closer to nature, because like people who are living in the cities, it's so hard for them to have access to nature. Maybe I'll be back on that. So it is very important to consider grassroots community and make sure that we are living in environment and nature in harmony. And again, I try to read a lot about nature, and I've been interested by Rwandan law, where they say that everyone has right to live in a clean and beautiful environment. So either grassroots community or maybe anyone else, we have a right to live in environment, but also, I mean, clean environment, but also we need to remember that we have responsibilities to care environment itself. So either we want or not, we live in environment and we will be part of environment. So I know that environment, it's doing its work to protect us, to nourish us, to give us food, to give us air, to give us clean water. But what is my part? What am I doing to make sure that I'm giving back to the environment? So what we need to try to do is to use those kind of resources, knowledge, and messages to give them to the community to know that they are part of environment and they need to conserve environment. And most of them, they've been doing that maybe intentionally. Like in my community, I can say there are some taboos which were there to conserve environment intentionally, because I grown seeing some people in the locality saying we have some taboos where there are some kind of trees that was prohibited to cut, some animals that were not eatable, I may say, and this was kind of giving a community opportunity to protect environment, maybe intentionally. So all that are the combination of showing how we people are connected to environment and what part of work that we can do to it.
Absolutely. And I love that about not being separate to the environment, because as a communicator, that's more than vital to stress that. And with grassroots action, you know, that's a huge part of grassroots' role to innovate and challenge the way that we're sharing and perceiving nature and the environment. And something that I want to quickly share about something I've seen here is loads and loads of language like let's partner with nature, or nature is our greatest investment, or planet Earth is our greatest investment. And what's really interesting about that is it's keeping us separate still. We're not having the conversation of being with nature, you know, we are nature. So I'll leave that thought there, and then going on to our separate topic.
Yeah, so we're going to look at the flip side of that, or maybe even, you know, looking at the polarity of what nature is. We normally assume that it's technology. So how do you see technology and production as a way to support nature access so that we don't have this, you know, tensional relationship between nature and technology?
Yes, I think this is the question on everyone's minds, because climate tech, ed tech is very quickly growing, and there's a really important role for it. But still, we must acknowledge that digital nature has its limits and restrictions. But for context of what we do, we build digital experiences, which is essentially 360 platforms, virtual reality, to make sure we can make the environmental learning, so geography, a lot of geography courses in the UK, as well as landscapes, more accessible to more people. But with that comes the huge responsibility of making sure that it's the foundational learning and making sure that it's introductory, it's providing the initial introduction, the initial interaction and engagement with nature, and then it's followed up with the physical engagement with nature. But a great thing with technology in general and digital solutions with that is that you can enhance accessibility greatly. And with digital experiences specifically, all the video content, even on social media, I'm sure you will see, the subtitles is like the tick box of accessibility. But we need to push that further, how we can have language translation automated, British Sign Language, dyslexia text, audio transcript. There's so many elements and avenues of accessibility, and having digital platforms and technology can do this for us. So how we can drive forward with that being the precedence and making sure that's the norm, that's the basics of how we communicate the environment, because everybody has the right to understand the world they live in. And,
and I think I'll add, before I go to Leonard on that next point, oftentimes the discussion and the conflict that's had with digital nature is that people who work with nature a lot think we're having a discussion about digital nature replacing nature itself, and that's not exactly the case. We want to use digital nature to create more access, more amplification of the messages of why we need to have contact with nature and why nature is so important and vital to both our human health but our planetary health. And obviously, when we're looking at the disparities of nature access, it's not seen so much in urban spaces. So we're trying to really forge a path and a space where we can start having that conversation, both at an educational level, at a grassroots level, and then at a policy level. And we'll get to that policy part afterwards. Leonard, how are you using technology within your work with nature?
Thank you so much. That's a really interesting question because I know even Emma talked about it, but for example, using filmmaking, because we are growing in this world, especially people who are living in a city like Dubai, you can see it's so hard to experience and to have experience with nature and to connect with nature. And I was asking people, can I find a forest around here in Dubai? It's so hard. So what we try to do is to bring this kind of using filmmaking, videography, photography, to try to showcase nature, beautiful mountains, forests, where I came from. Rwanda is being known to the country of 1,000 hills because we have so many beautiful thousands in our countries which are green. So we need to use filmmaking and videos to showcase how beautiful is nature, using this kind of online tourism, showing people animals. There was a funny fact that happened to me when I was living in my local village. One small kid came to our home, and I don't know, you guys, if you know a cow, right? So, but when he came, he said, he saw a cow, and he said, bro, look at that big dog, man. And we were just laughing because I was surprised, being a Rwandan boy who doesn't know a cow, because a cow is something big, meaningful in my country. And the guy say, this is not a cow, this is not a dog. And he said again, this is a big pig. And I was laughing. So we need to use this kind of materials, production, to show people about nature, teaching children about species, plants. They're important because most of plants are very useful to our health. That's where we get medicine, for example, for people who use traditional medicine. So those production materials are helpful to spread the message, to spread the news about nature, but also it's help us to connect to nature. Like most of the time I like to see videos around the world of nature, animals, and when I look at them I feel just like there online. So it's very important to use those for example, I use the videos, but also you can use other materials like pictures, arts, so which is very important to give people messages and also to allow them connect to nature. So we need to use them, but also you mentioned something about the translations, because most of materials, for example, are in English and those international languages. So there is a need to translate those materials to local languages where possible. Like in my country, you cannot find most of people who can speak freely English or maybe French. So we need to put all those things in our local languages, or maybe putting subtitles for people to know what is that. Because even like in my country, let me give you like a simple experience. I've been seeing gorillas on television. I know gorillas. I know how they live. Luckily, I studied wildlife conservation. I know the life of animals and plants, but I never met a gorilla in person. So that's the role of this kind of production, to show people the nature and to know, that it's important, and again feel like we are visiting them. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And Kalpana, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think there's a part around like the emergence of new technology that's coming up. Obviously, we hear the word of AI a lot, and generative AI, and how that's impacting our relationships to nature images, etc. And I think there's a fine balance of the kind of structures we need to create in order to be in right relationship both with these emerging technologies and with nature. But it's definitely conversations that we need to start having today with all stakeholders involved, because otherwise, it's just being created by like Silicon Valley bros. Sorry if you are one in this room. But we need to have inclusive conversations that actually make these things accessible, because who are we making these structures for? And I think that that's a question that we need to hold in any space that you work in.
Absolutely. And with that as well, on the note of technology and production, there is one small note as well to consider, which is that obviously it's vital with accessibility, it's vital with immersivity, engagement, but it still comes with a digital carbon footprint. So we need to do a lot more research in that area to really understand how we can share these messages, this information, these learnings in a fundamentally sustainable way to match what we're communicating. But going on to the next question, it's a little bit more technical, but getting into more of the alternative strategies and legal frameworks. What do you guys think can support the progress on this?
Do you want to go first?
No, maybe you can come up.
I can start if you'd like. So with the rights for nature, incorporating that in digital technologies and work in general, a lot of it down to how we do this is through framing. So making sure the strategy and framework is in place. In fact, exactly what you said, Leonard, in making sure that nature, language, use, the way it's portrayed is not separate. So from more of an educational lens, at the moment, it's often put in the box of geography. Climate change is a geographer's problem all the time, which then has a hugely problematic issue of integrating it as an interest. Are you interested in the environment? Oh, no, I don't do geography, so probably not. And it really separates us from understanding that we don't really have a choice. We live on the planet, we all do. And we have to, and we should want to understand how it impacts us and how we impact it. So I think from framing, as I mentioned earlier, with the use of words, partnering with nature, but we are nature, what does that actually mean? But anything more to do with your fields of work?
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, you mentioned, I think the framing you're speaking to is like the cultural frameworks that we have around language or entertainment, whether that's through media or different forms of technology. But something that always comes up for me that I think is often left out of the conversation is technology is not this ephemeral, like elusive entity. Technology is composed most often by vulnerable and marginalized communities who are living on the front lines of crisis. So when you're talking about making accessible technology and technology that is fighting for nature and for people, we need to think about, you know, where are these emerging technologies based and how are the bigger tech companies profiting off people? And they're also profiting off the land and for nature because all of technology gets its energy from nature and the earth. So making sure that that's still in the conversations. And we are talking about social justice as well when we're talking about how technology can create greener and better futures.
Oh, thank you so much. I think I will be talking a little bit about, you said about framing, framework. So I think, first of all, you have to consider like all kind of corners, because if you're gonna bring these kind of technologies, you have to make sure that if these people are getting it, like, for example, I will talk in my experience, where I came from, especially in Africa. I'm not sure if most of people are able to use technologies, like, for example, if you bring an application that will be teaching people about nature. So you need to know and to ask yourself, is this going to be a solution to the grassroots community or maybe those people at a local level? You have to consider them. And again, it will be back to the language barrier. So, and again, you have to consider the generation that you want to talk to. Because if you are going to bring something serious maybe to young, children. So we need to make these kind of things, to adapt to the kind of population that we want to talk to. There was someone who was trying to say, for example, because young generations, like most of them in my continent, they don't like agriculture activities. So when you want to teach them agriculture, they said, you guys try to make it sexy so that people will be interested in it. So that's kind of, I may call it a language of transmitting a message to kind of specific people that you want to talk to. If they are children, you have to use this kind of interesting graphics that are moving in kids' ways. So I think we need to consider all those kind of people, and then we see what kind of technology that we can bring to them. Thank you.
Yes, I'll also add very quickly that we need to think about the legal structures that we can implement, and that we can also ask for, the corporations and the brands that we like to also uphold them into holding nature in their board and bringing nature into those decision-making spaces. And if they're not doing that, then challenge them as to why. I know in the UK, Faith of Nature has recently put nature in their boardroom, as well as future generations into their boardroom. So that's really amplifying the way that they're thinking about their stakeholders, and also, where they're actually putting their investment in. So that's what rights for nature really means, and creating that legal legacy that actually is really fighting for a green and just future. And I guess maybe a question for you both is now, what is some of the advice that you give to everyone here, or corporations, organizations, business leaders in the room, about how they can incorporate nature into their business models and into their spaces?
Do you want me to start?
Or maybe in my country we used to say ladies first.
Thank you. Well, actually, it's really interesting that you mentioned about challenging brands, those frameworks, those legal structures in place, because I think that's really important with social media as well, because I don't know if anyone came to the TikTok event on Monday here, but the conversation was really interesting because the conversations were raised about how we can leverage that climate engagement and conversation on TikTok, but then how do we manage the brands that also want to benefit from that? How do we monitor greenwashing, the legal structures in place for greenwashing in general? And kind of from that is also challenging ourselves and how we communicate and share this information, because I'll use an example, but recently I've been working in the UK in London-based schools for ocean conservation. And the huge issue has been that there was just such a lack of engagement, and it wasn't really down to the students themselves. It was down to the lack of resources that were provided for them, so they just didn't feel connected to the coast. They didn't see why it was relevant to them. And we needed to get into the nitty-gritty of how we can rebuild that connection, and to do that we had to challenge the way that we were providing materials. So we were providing videos, workshops, for example, but if they haven't really seen the UK coast and hadn't really seen it for themselves and felt connected, then it still feels distant and not their problem. So we built a digital field trip called Digital Ocean School with Surfers Against Sewage, and that was to mainly reconnect more of an urban audience to the oceans, but also it was to push the learning further and wider. So we were testing out the accessibility of British Sign Language, dyslexia text, language translation that I mentioned, so that everybody could use it in the way that they wanted to, and then it really made sure that we were engaging people in the ocean. We weren't just serving information and hoping some of it would stick. So I think challenging the way that you innovate and communicate is absolutely fundamental. So I really urge in your organizations or as individuals, you really question that if you were in their position, how would you become connected? How, from the very start, from the scratch, would you want to be engaged in this? But yeah, in a nutshell, to challenge yourselves and others.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question indeed, because each kind of organization, wherever you work on, in any sector, just you need to consider nature connection and again, nature conservation. Like even here I can say maybe we are not just inclusive. So I want to challenge people that we need to be inclusive and make sure that we are including everyone. And in kind of messages that we are trying to give to people, we need to be inclusive. Like I saw something there in the Blue Zone Youth and Children Pavilion where they have sign language translation. That was really cool. So in each kind of things that we do, make sure that you are considering nature. Try to do something, because this is, I call it a personal commitment. Wherever you do, try to consider that you need to protect nature, and nature needs, because when you protect nature, nature will pay you back. So whatever you do, try to consider maybe circular economy, try to do circularity at your home. There was something that I got from last year from a speech from someone who says, for example, like at personal level, you can try maybe to buy what you need, not what you want. That's a good kind of idea. So because sometimes we go buying everything we love on the way, but without a plan. So we need to buy what we want. For example, if I need water, am I need it really? I have to question myself again and again at the level of organizations. In each projects or activities we do, we need to consider nature conservation. like I love the ideas that I got from different hotels where, for example, they say, please, you can reuse your tower, or maybe if you think you cannot, put it on the ground. So that's like a good idea and concern to consider reusing materials if possible. So I think each organization, each sector, each person need to think again. How can I contribute? How can I consider nature in my life? There are people who go, for example, to brush with a full bottle of water. So that's like a simple example of activity that we used to do. There are other who used to open water and falls. They brush water's going. Just that's like kind of activities we need to change at personal level, but also at organizational level. So we need to bring some frameworks and, I may say, activities and consideration of nature in every activity we do. I think considering nature in whatever we do, considering others, I mean inclusivity, that we make us achieving the plan of conserving and caring biodiversity and nature in general. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Kalpana, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think maybe to give it a bit of context, we're at COP28, and a lot of the solutions that we're still implementing are very much human-centered and human-focused, and fighting for the rights of nature really allows us to include a different voice who hasn't had a space as a stakeholder to be here, and to create a different form of solutions beyond what our human imagination can think of, because that will only get us so far. So when we actually fight for the rights of voices who are marginalized, who are vulnerable, and that includes within multi-species justice, who are the voices that are not in the room, who are being impacted by very human crises, that actually will create and forge a path for a better future. But we need to push for these spaces to have that kind of inclusivity, and to do it in a way, it goes back to your point around language, that's not tokenized, because language without actions does nothing. And we're going to be here COP after COP after COP. This isn't a business model for anyone. We don't want this to continue to happen or to continue to want to be here. We're trying to solve an issue so that we can all go out and live our lives with joy, and cherish the land around us, cherish the nature around us. So it's about thinking regeneratively, inclusively, but also, knowing that this at some point, we want this to end, so can we work forward with like an end in our mindset?
Absolutely. That I totally agree with your final statements. And just to add on as well, from the language point and to the challenging as well that we keep referring to, how we can push these boundaries further. It's quite simply, if you guys don't know the answer and you don't know the audiences or the consumers, the customers that you're working with, you need to work with the voices that represent that. So for us with Digital Ocean School, I live in Devon in the UK by the coast, so I've been very connected to the ocean my whole life. So we needed to bring urban voices in to help us then curate those stories and those solutions for urban communities. So please do challenge and work with others, and really push yourself to work with others as well. And just as a final collective thought, we ultimately live on this planet, so we need to make sure that nature is not just an interest. It is fundamentally for everybody and is part of everybody. So please, please share far and wide the importance of rights with nature. And also, we all deserve to make sure that we understand and are provided with the sufficient tools to live in a more just future. So thank you all for joining. And is there any last final statements?
Yeah, I'll just maybe try to condense my million of thoughts that are running across my mind right now. I think we always need to remember that fighting for nature is is actually creating a space where nature can thrive. If nature thrives, humans can thrive. Because at the end of the day, and again, it goes back to language, but this is not a planetary crisis. This is a human crisis. And the Earth will be fine. The Earth will continue to exist. It's existed across 6 mass extinctions. It's really us who are in peril. It's our own systems. So by including others in that conversation and by actually giving the rights to entities who have always had those rights since they've evolved in this space, will allow us to have a better future.
So thank you so much. I first thank everyone who just participated in this and the audience. But the last challenge that I want to give you is that we are all part of nature. We are nature, and we need to connect with nature. So I may ask you maybe to think one thing that nature does for you today, or maybe in days back. And if you find that, try to think, what did I do for nature? And then you try to see if you are selfish or if you are just matching with, if you are paying back what nature does to you. So thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, guys. Right. I think we have to have is it a photo? Oh, we can.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, we do.
Forgot about the roaming mic.
Thank you. Just wanted to thank you for the very insightful things that you had to say. It was validating in a way because I chime in what you are promoting. I'm an educator and a business educator, but since I started learning more about science and planetary crisis and so forth, I tried to introduce my students and connect them to those things, nature-based things. And in an environment like Dubai, sometimes it's difficult because we all come from somewhere else and we live indoors a lot. Anyway, one of the most effective ways I wanted to share was a 3D experience that I brought in for them, and it fast-tracked their connection with nature like nothing else I could have taught them, because it was immersive and it was sensory overload for them to experience this film 3D with smell and touch and vibration. And the film was about the Amazon burning, or about a tree in the Amazon burning. But everything I had told them before that was very small in consequence. This one digital experience for them, they just got it. And I just thought that's really knowing your audience and what connects them. And so I had a room full of advocates after that. So it's really important to try different things. And so thank you for your insights.
Amazing, thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for the panel. It was really insightful to hear from each of you and a bit more about your work and backgrounds and what brought you here today as well. I have 100 questions that I want to ask, but I'm going to try to focus it on one. So you spoke a lot about how those virtual or digital or technological experiences can deepen people's connection with nature. And something that I think about that happens in real experiences with nature is this exploitation as well. I mean, I'm from Canada and I know 100 finance bros who are like, yeah, I love nature. I get in a Jeep and go to the mountains every weekend. And I'm like, that's not loving nature. And so I'm curious about how we can create these experiences that bake reciprocity into how we interact with nature, so we're not just ending up with a bunch of virtual tourism, but actually making sure that these technological experiences bring value to nature as well.
Totally. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a small example. So at Nowadays on Earth, we're working on a digital app called We Grow, which allows us to have an interaction with nature, that's gamified, but allows us to actually interact with grassroots communities who are doing the work on the ground. Because I want to move away from relating to nature as a museum, as something that we can objectify. When we advocate for nature contact, I'm really advocating for nature interaction, and that needs to happen across a digital level. I think the power of emerging technologies through AR and VR can really have an impact, but those technologies, again, need to be there needs to be a feedback loop back into the communities of where it's being located and placed at, because if not, we are kind of diverting from the very real realities and the injustices that we're facing physically on the ground. So, moving away from like the metaverse, and I'm sorry if I'm like pissing anyone off, if anyone here is like a fan of the metaverse, I'm sorry. But we're moving away from those like fantasy worlds that are very much not tangibly placed with communities, and actually letting communities create and have agency in the way that those digital spaces are formed. But again, moving away from a human-centered approach to how can we invite species to become co-creators. And one of the workshops that we've been running here has been asking people the question, what future would we dream of if we dream with plants? When plants, as sentient beings, because they are sentient beings, they have a neurobiology field space that can interact with the world and does interact with the world, what would it look like when they interact with technology? What worlds would they build? And we need to start asking those questions with the technologies that we're building in order to actually create it a way that's like accessible. And I mean, maybe just to add and close it off, the way that we kind of see nature and technology, it's one and the same. I mean, nature is one of the most incredibly intelligent organisms and systems of programming, of data sets. So it's really switching the way that we have been conditioned to see nature, and going into the experience of what is nature. And if you're a part of that, who are you as well? I don't know if you want to add anything.
Thank you so much. I think that was a really important question, because I know most of people going to nature maybe to enjoy, to have fun, and this shows you kind of how human being is selfish. So I think what you said is true, but also we need to make these resources, or maybe these virtual tools, to not only connect people to nature, but also to teach about nature conservation. So that should be a way of connecting people, but also with a message to them to conserve biodiversity. Like if they saw a beautiful bird flying, then you tell the message that that bird maybe is critically endangered or something. But also in national parks or forests or wherever we go to enjoy nature, we have to consider and to have this commitment of loving nature. So we should be going to nature not only to enjoy or maybe having fun only, but also nature is a good school. We must go there to learn how nature is beautiful, but also what nature do for us, and again, come up with a commitment of what can I do for nature. That's what I was challenging you. Please try to understand and brainstorm yourself and know, what does nature did for me? If you know that, what can I do for nature? So that's the whole idea that I want to promote in that. So in terms of conservation and tourism, there should be a linkage between them. If I'm going to tourism, how can I behave? I've seen a lot of people going maybe to the forest with the bottles and plastic materials and whatever, they throw them out. They don't care species. So that's bad deed. So we must be going to nature, but also having this kind of good behavior of how we can live with nature, because even nature can feel the pain, can feel these good activities we do. Because when we do this, we do good things to nature. Nature can feel it. So I think maybe I touched your question, but maybe Emma can add
Yeah,
something.
that's
I don't know.
great.
Thank you.
That's brilliant. I agree with you both. And my last final point onto that would be it really depends how it's used. So, the purpose of that technology or platform. And what's really interesting that we found recently is there's a much broader use than just, like you said, kind of platforming a beautiful environment with, like Leonard said, the educational side. But also, we've been recently working with the Irish government to build their first digital report to engage their population in net zero targets. I thought that was so interesting because we're so used to environmental reporting being these kind of black and white, 100 pages, and their use and their population, so their audience tends to skip to the summary and they just want to know what they need to know. But building these immersive technologies and incorporating it into something like this for a digital report is really exciting because you can have that mass influence. You can not only engage an audience, but a population in their net zero strategies to educate them, but to also support them, as well as for that a specific example, they were trying to get feedback on the net zero targets that they were launching. So having that direct interaction with the population and the government was crucial. So it completely depends on how these technologies are being used. And I agree with you, Kalpana, about like Meta, for example, the metaverse. You can shop in the metaverse. That has a huge digital carbon footprint. And those uses can be diverted into a far more useful way. And that's why sectors like the environmental sector should be harnessing that and utilizing that, because we've got a huge opportunity to engage more people, to make it more accessible, as well as to educate. Thank you. Brilliant. Have we got time for any more questions? One more?
Thank you for the insights. I'm actually myself Saudasan, and I have a question. I led an NGO back in my country that works for skill development in education. As we are talking about protecting the nature, so it directly proportional to the what awareness we are providing. So is there any framework or model that you are working on that must be interactive for the children's and the new generation? Because back in our school, when we taught geography, so we just learned it for passing the exams. So have you made any framework or course? So that's my question. Thank you.
Well, just to kick off, thank you for your question. And framework-wise, there isn't really one. There isn't many frameworks at the moment to use. But there is two organizations and campaigns that I would really stress that you could follow up into, which is Teach the Future and Students Organizing for Sustainability. So they're really unpicking ways to incorporate the environment in more subjects, as well as just broadly throughout school life and daily lives as well. So they are doing an amazing job and have loads of accessible resources. I think that's one thing I can't stress enough. There is actually so many resources out there already that it's important not to feel alone in it or reinvent the wheel, because those two organizations are definitely leading it. Is there anyone else who you'd recommend or suggest framework-wise?
I think just from a very grassroots practical space, you know your students, you know your community, you can build those frameworks with them and include them in the conversation, because oftentimes like younger people have a lot to teach us and like how they can understand the issues and also how to involve it within your curriculum. But I would take a more grassroots approach.
Yeah, sure. I would like to recommend something for you, maybe, but I'm not sure. Maybe we'll keep in touch. There is one guy who wrote a book that can be useful for kids or maybe for young generation. Teaches about climate change. So maybe I think she's still here at COP. Maybe we can connect and then you get the book, which is very, very interesting. Thank you.
And just also work with your students, see what they want to see and what they want to hear and how they want their frameworks to pan out, because I think there's a phrase that harnessed from the disability movement, not about us, without us. And I think if incorporating that when building frameworks is vital. So definitely engage your students. Thank you. I think that's all that we have time for. But thank you very much again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of COP.